All right, fellas, we should be live. We are now, a couple hours removed, 12 hours removed from the 2023 NFL Draft first round. Of course, we will be live later today around 6:45, 7 p.m. Eastern time, talking about day two of the draft, which for us in fantasy typically actually is more exciting because we kind of know who is going to go in the first round. But we still had a lot of excitement to break down yesterday. I would say, generally speaking, one of the better fantasy-friendly first rounds that we've seen in a while. Aside from Will Levis and Michael Mayer falling out of the first round, there was a lot to like about a lot of these landing spots.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you kind of mentioned it. Obviously, Will Levis not going in the first round. A little bit of a blow if you need another quarterback and you don't have a top 4 overall pick in Superflex. But aside from that, I mean, you get Anthony Richardson to literally the perfect scheme with the perfect head coach with Shane Steichen that was able to develop a guy like Jalen Hurts. You basically get Jalen Hurts on steroids from a prospect perspective. You're getting this freak athlete with a huge arm under the tutelage
let's
of
save
Shane
all this because
Steichen.
we're going to go pick by pick in order. So save the Anthony Richardson stuff. Let's start with Bryce Young, who is the first overall pick. And on Twitter, if you guys don't follow me on Twitter, it's on the screen right now. I put out a thread basically ranking my landing spots, draft capital combinations. So this is not my super flex rankings. It is where, what is the stock watch basically on these players. I ranked Bryce Young at 8. Of course, he had no choice. He was going to go first overall. He was going to go to the Carolina Panthers. But the nice thing is, he's still going to be my 102 in super flex leagues. Nothing happened, and really nothing was going to happen on day one of the NFL draft to make me change that opinion. You go to a Carolina Panthers offense that sneakily ranked top 10 in pass blocking per PFF. So they have a pretty good offensive line. They added Miles Sanders. They added Hayden Hurst. They added Adam Thielen and DJ Chark in free agency. So they're trying. I mean, they could still trade for somebody. They have pick 39 in the draft, which is an early second rounder today. They have 93 overall. They have some fourth round picks. So not a bad landing spot for Bryce Young, but definitely, not the best landing spot we've seen in the world for a quarterback prospect.
For sure. I'm not going to get into the other quarterbacks quite yet, but out of the quarterbacks, clearly, the one picked fourth overall got the better landing spot overall. But like you kind of mentioned with Bryce Young, he's going first overall. He's under a new coaching staff with Frank Reich, with Josh McCown in the town. They still have a second round pick this upcoming second round, 39th overall, I believe is their pick, that they could potentially use to add another wide receiver, maybe a Josh Downs type, maybe another, I know Jonathan Mingo's getting hyped. Just another body to add to this wide receiver room. You brought in Chark, you brought in Adam Thielen, you have Terrace Marshall there. Although it's not the most ideal of circumstances, I do think that this is not a train wreck of a supporting cast, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, we knew Bryce was going to Carolina. Not much schematically that we would need to talk about. In my top 10 rankings of these landing spots for the 10 prospects that went in the first round, I have CJ Stroud at number 9. So I think, again, he's a slightly worse prospect than Bryce Young, so that factors in a little bit. But he does go second overall, which is all we really care about. The draft capital for the quarterback position is all that really matters. But it is a barren weapon score, even more so, I would say, than Carolina, because you have Dalton Schultz, John Mechie, Robert Woods, Nico Collins. You have a solid young running back in Dameon Pierce. But what worries me really about CJ Stroud is the Will Anderson trade, because they traded away their first round pick, which could have been Marvin Harrison, right? We could have seen, reunite Ohio State quarterback with Marvin Harrison, because they might have been bad yet again this year, had a top 5 pick, and that pick could have gone to Marvin Harrison, get him his number 1 receiver back. They still have the Browns pick, but we don't anticipate the Browns pick being any higher than at least 15, because Watson's a great quarterback. He's got some good weapons there. They still have, pick 65 in the third round today, pick 73 in the third round today. So they could still add a Cedric Tillman type, a Jonathan Mingo type. Oh, yeah. But their line, unlike Bryce Young's line in Carolina, ranked 28th in pass blocking. Even though they have one of the best left tackles in the league in Laramie Tunsil, the, whole line as a whole unit wasn't very good. So we have CJ Stroud going from an offense where he had playmakers galore to an offense where he doesn't really have that many playmakers, an offensive line that was pretty good for him at Ohio State, to an offensive line that's not very good here. So we're going to get right into Anthony Richardson. We don't even need to talk about anything else. Let's go right to Anthony Richardson, because the question that everybody's going to ask is, do I take CJ Stroud or do I take Anthony Richardson at 103 or potentially even 102? People are going to want to take Anthony Richardson at.
Yeah, and that's something you guys will know is we're divided on that because, as Corey kind of mentioned, he still prefers the other two as prospects, despite the landing spot of Anthony Richardson. For me, Anthony Richardson coming in, assuming he got in the right spot, was always going to be in contention for the 102. For me, going to be the 103. And when it comes to it, I'll let you break down the exacts of his spot because you got the stats listed here, but I prefaced this earlier in the stream, could not have gotten the absolute or more of an absolute nuts in terms of the landing spot.
Yeah, exactly. Top 4 overall draft capital, which was a little bit of a question mark for him, especially what we see happen to Will Levis. It was very possible that Anthony Richardson slid, further in the draft as well. Shane Steichen, like you mentioned, at offensive coordinator, who developed Jalen Hurts from this inaccurate quarterback coming from Oklahoma into probably the league MVP had he stayed healthy last year. Good O-line on paper. I mean, we don't know for sure if Quentin Nelson, all these guys are going to bounce back, but on paper, it should be at least a better offensive line than what CJ Stroud is dealing with, if not better than what Bryce Young is dealing with as well. He has the best receiving talent around him of any of these guys with Michael Pittman. I mean, second round pick Alec Pierce last year, third round pick Jelani Woods last year. They still have the 34th pick today to go after maybe a Josh Downs, as a Jalen Hyatt, somebody like that, Cedric Tillman again. These guys all coming up, and he has by far the best running back beside him in his backfield of any of these guys as well. So I personally, like you said, I'm not going to take him over CJ Stroud at 103, but this is like the type of situation where I would differentiate. If I have 103 across 3 leagues, I'm going to probably take Stroud in 2 of them and Richardson in 1 kind of thing. So it also depends on team construction too. If you have Kenny Pickett and Kirk Cousins as your quarterbacks, I'd probably take CJ Stroud. He's the safer bet. He's the guy that could, he's going to give you more production early on, especially because we don't know how long Anthony Richardson's going to sit for. But if you already have Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow or something like that, go take the swing on Anthony Richardson. You're not going to need CJ Stroud to start for you at any point, so you might as well swing for the fences.
Yeah, no, exactly. For me personally, like you kind of said, it is team dependent. If you're relying, let's say you missed on a quarterback last year, you got the 103, like you kind of mentioned, a middling type of core, Goff, Pickett, and maybe like Geno Smith, and you want to add, a guy like CJ Stroud to be that quarterback one for your team for the future. I understand that. On the flip side, though, like you kind of said, if you have stability and you could potentially swing on a huge leverage piece like Anthony Richardson, like this is a guy, I've mentioned it probably a zillion times in the last 3 months, but the floor obviously more volatile than a guy like CJ Stroud. But dude, if this guy hits his ceiling and he's got the landing spot, he's got the coaching staff, like I said, to hit his ceiling, this is a legitimate top 5 overall ceiling here. And again, like you said, if you have your quarterback position set and you can take the swing on a leverage piece that can maybe net you 3x its worth this time next year, this time the year after, I'm all for that position.
Yeah, it's really difficult too, because from a value insulation standpoint, we've seen what a guy like Trey Lance has been able to. Trey Lance still has a stranglehold on Danny right now, and nothing has come out good about Trey Lance. Like, that's what mobile quarterbacks can do on the Dynasty open market. So even if Anthony Richardson struggles his rookie year, if he gives us, a game where he rushes for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, people are still going to buy in, and he's still going to hold value on the market. Whereas CJ Stroud, if he looks terrible, if he looks like Zach Wilson this year, it's possible that he, falls out of favor. Even if he looks like, a Tua Tagovailoa rookie season, it's definitely possible that these guys fall out of favor a little bit. So it's balancing the prospect profile, which I think clearly CJ Stroud and Bryce Young were better quarterback prospects, better in college, led their teams to high-level production, versus the mystery box, what Anthony Richardson can become. And I will say the floor for Anthony Richardson is a little bit higher than people think, and the ceiling for Bryce Young and CJ Stroud is a little bit higher than people think. So it's balancing all that kind of stuff. For me, these are 102, 103, 104, whatever order you want to put them in, although I would say Bryce Young should be 1 or 102 behind Bijan Robinson. And speaking of Bijan Robinson, he was the first non-quarterback fantasy asset off the board as expected to the Atlanta Falcons, 8th overall. When I ranked these landing spots, best, draft capital landing spot combination, he was 1. I think Bijan Robinson landed in one of the best landing spots that he could have possibly gone to. And let me explain, because you guys might not think that because Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke are their quarterbacks. He goes top 10 in the NFL draft. That is a huge point of emphasis for a running back. It means he's going to get everything under the sun. Receiving work, carries, goal line work. Yeah, they still have Algier there, but he goes to an offense that ranked 5th in adjusted line yards. This is a great offensive line at run blocking. It's a great scheme for running the football with Arthur Smith. We've seen what he's done with Derrick Henry over the past couple of years. First in PFF run blocking in the NFL last year, 6 points ahead of the second place Baltimore Ravens team. Last year's starters, Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson, who is a converted wide receiver, were both top 5 in rushing DVOA in the NFL. And Algier was a 5th-round rookie as much as I liked him. Bijan is a transcendent talent coming into an offense that already knows how to run the ball at the best level in the NFL. They led the league in rushing yards. He has Kyle Pitts and Drake London to take away attention. They'll probably add more receiving talent at some point in this draft as well. This is one of the best landing spots he could have gone to. He is a smash at 101. As far as Algier goes, obviously he's a big loser. He's probably downgraded from a guy that you could have gotten RB2 production out of this year to a guy that's going to be more of your A.J. Dillon, Alexander Madison spectrum of handcuffs. Yeah. But I still think this team runs the ball enough that he's still going to have best ball appeal. He's still going to have, spike week potential and great handcuff value.
Yeah, I mean, like, we're obviously the ceiling is limited now, but just because they have Bijan, and I do think Bijan, of course, is going to get a workhorse role. But like you kind of said, this is a team that wants to run the ball. They just took a running back 8th overall, which kind of speaks to speaks volumes to their philosophy, their culture of their team, rather than focusing on the positional value of the pick. Because a lot of NFL fans will say, taking a running back 8th overall, what are you doing? But for fantasy, we don't care about the logistics. We don't care about, this team fucked up by taking a running back 8th overall when they personally are a couple years away from competing. All we care about is that team investments there. Like you kind of said, they know how to run the ball, led the league in rushing yards last year. I wouldn't bat an eye. I wouldn't argue with somebody if they wanted to take Bijan Robinson like in the fringe top 5 of their redraft leagues. So he's the Smash 101 in Dynasty from this rookie draft.
Yeah, and he's absolutely the type of guy that you can take at the tail end of the first, early second round of a startup. Special grade asked, as a Bijan owner, what would you send out to acquire Algier? It shouldn't cost you more than an early 3rd round pick, and I would absolutely pay that price as a Bijan manager, even if not as a Bijan manager. If you guys are in a competitive window and you want a 5th running back or something like that, think of Algier like A.J. Dillon, because I think that's exactly what he's going to represent. Big physical running back, can get some goal line work, can get some touchdown opportunity, is going to be an RB1 if Bijan gets hurt. Like, that's exactly what's basically going to happen, minus the fact that Aaron Rodgers is not playing quarterback for the team. But I think Desmond Ridder is well set up with Pitts, with London, with Bijan in the backfield, with a great offensive line to take a step forward. And worst case scenario, Taylor Heineke moved the Washington Commanders offense last year, and if he has to start games, it'll be fine.
Agreed. We'll get through a couple comments and then go through some of the other landing spots, because as you guys know, if you watch the first round, there's a lot to unpack here, specifically with 4 wide receivers going off the board when everybody was talking about how down the wide receiver class is. Another running back going in the top 15 we'll get to in a second, but let's get through the comments. How you feeling, Danny? A lot better now, a lot more sober. If you guys tuned into the stream last night, the 4 hours plus hour or so we spent on Mason's stream, like, I was in a good mood. We'll just say that.
He was zooted a little bit. Yeah, we're gonna just skim through these comments. Will, good question. We will be doing some dynasty decisions next week for sure. And also feel free to just ask us any specific questions in the DMs on Discord. As a Mother Flocker tier member, Will, you have access to that Tone Setters Discord. So even if if you need advice right away, just feel free to ask questions whenever you need to. Rashad White and Treylon Burks or Pollard and Godwin. Give me Pollard and Godwin.
Oh yeah, the latter for sure. I love Treylon, don't get me wrong, but I think Rashad White is going to have a backfield made at some point today.
Yeah. Aiden says was offered 105, 108, 2024 first for Hurts. I'm taking Hurts there. I'm easily taking Hurts there. Draft today is at 7 p.m. So definitely join us there. Would not take that deal for Jalen Hurts. I would, in that situation, Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, take the shot on Anthony Richardson. You got 2 guys already. I'm totally doing that.
No, I agree with you there. Absolutely.
Okay, we'll talk about the receivers in a bit. So let's get back. The big surprise, the big surprise was Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Gibbs going. Go ahead.
I was just going to quickly add the big surprise that Mason gave us the little sneak peek on, because obviously he was located in the draft. He heard the reactions. He saw what was going on. So he said on stream, if you guys want to run that back, that take care, or not take care, but pay attention to what the Detroit pick's going to be. And we were on the edge of our seats. We're like, what could this be? And I remember you said earlier when the Lions traded from 6 to 12, you had said, do you think if they take Bijan if he's there at 12? And I looked at you and I'm like, there's no way they take Bijan if he's there at 12. Not only did they not take the best running back in this class at 12, I'll let you get into it. They took Jahmyr Gibbs at 12th overall when this was a guy that we expect to go maybe late first at the peak. They shocked the world last night.
Yeah, and I would say this probably had the most fantasy ripple effect of any of the moves because not only, let's talk about Gibbs first because he's the guy that went 12th overall. Great news for him. Top 15 draft capital is vastly, vastly different than him being an early second round pick like he was projected to be in the NFL draft or even a late first round pick. So it seems muddy right now because Swift is there. He's a receiving back. David Montgomery's there. We expect him to inherit Jamal Williams' role as the early down guy / goal line guy. But this was always going to factor in for Jahmyr Gibbs. He was never going to go to a team, even with this draft capital, and get 280 carries and 90 targets in a season. He's just not going to get that type of workload. He's under 200 pounds. He's not going to get that type of workload in the NFL. But what's going in his favor here is that he plays for a top 5 offense in DVOA last year. The Detroit Lions, a top 5 offense in DVOA, scoring, whatever you want to look at. Run heavy team in the red zone. So even though David Montgomery, we expect to get the bulk of those carries down there, Gibbs is going to get enough because they run the ball so much in the red zone. It's a staff that coached Alvin Kamara in New Orleans, who Jahmyr Gibbs has drawn many comparisons to, given that, you know, he has all this target upside. This is a dude that can be awesome for fantasy. And this, I think, was one of the best landing spots he could have gone to. Now, obviously, the big ripple effect is DeAndre Swift. What do the Lions do with him? Do they keep him? Do they trade him? There's reports already that teams are calling about DeAndre Swift. It's possible that he gets moved today or tomorrow or you know, before week 1. Even if DeAndre Swift stays there this season, I would still take Jahmyr Gibbs 105 at the highest in a Superflex league. 102 in a 1 quarterback league. It really all depends on team need. Do you prefer JSN? Do you prefer Jahmyr Gibbs? That's my thoughts on him. I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, right? Because when it comes to Jahmyr Gibbs, the thing I wanted to preface too is if you saw the reaction of every single Lions coaching member, general management staff, whatever, every member of that Lions war room, when they made the call for Jahmyr Gibbs, it looked as if they got their favorite player in the draft. It's actually remarkable how excited that they were to take the second best running back at 12th overall. But regardless, what that tells me, like you kind of said, if this staff had so much exposure to a guy like Alvin Kamara, and you mentioned Gibbs is getting that Alvin Kamara comparison from a lot of media outlets across Twitter, you know, wherever you find it. If they see that type of potential, and they're willing to take that plunge at 12th overall, despite giving David Montgomery a 3-year deal, despite having DeAndre Swift on the roster, you could be looking at, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if, assuming, you know, Swift is dealt today, which I think is a really good possibility given the rumors going around right now. I wouldn't be shocked if Jahmyr Gibbs was a top 12 overall fantasy running back as a rookie.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be shocked as well. Like I think you alluded to, how many running backs are we taking over Gibbs in Dynasty right now? Probably Bijan, probably Breece Hall, probably Jonathan Taylor. I would maybe still take Kenneth Walker, given the additions they've made to that offense and the prospect profile that he had as well. But I mean, he's right there as like RB4, RB5, Travis Etienne right there as well in Dynasty. So yeah, great landing spot. Great news for Jahmyr Gibbs. We saw 4 receivers go in a row, 20 to 23. The first of which was Jackson Smith-Njigba, who probably goes to a suboptimal landing spot in most people's minds, right? I would assume JSN stands would have wanted him to go to the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Bills, maybe even the Jets at 15 or something like that. But he was the first wide receiver drafted. He goes top 20 in the NFL draft. He's a very good fit for the offense as like a slot flanker type. He can play on the outside, even though he only played in the slot in college, in my opinion. 31-year-old Tyler Lockett, who has an out in his contract in 2024. He complements DK Metcalf well for the long term. And I think the most underrated part of this is the fact that he is a very good fit with Geno Smith, who's an accurate, you know, over the middle game manager type of quarterback, akin to what we see in Detroit with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff. So for me, I think that JSN is a great fit in this offense. And I think I'm still willing to take him at 105, 106 area, depending on your thoughts on Gibbs, depending on what your team needs, all that kind of stuff. So I'll let you talk about Gibbs, but about JSN, but I think he's still awesome.
Yeah, no, 100%. I do think, and I'm updating my ranks as we speak right now. I know a question was asked there. We're updating our ranks throughout the next day and obviously tomorrow throughout the 4 to 7 range. But for the most part, it's going to be based off what happens in the first 3 rounds. And I'll tell you right now that JSN and Jahmyr Gibbs are back-to-back in my rankings at the 105 and the 106 and back-to-back in my overall Superflex rankings. I genuinely think this is a pick and choose what you want type of situation. Jahmyr Gibbs got that level of a landing spot, that level of a draft capital situation. And JSN, although it's like, quote unquote, a suboptimal spot, like, yeah, it's not freaking Los Angeles. It's not, even Dallas if you were to fall there. It's not going to be like the top 5 overall offenses we recognize right now. But can it be a top 10 offense? Can it be a top 8 offense? Geno Smith played very well last year. Obviously, you have Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Kenneth Walker added to this team. I just wouldn't be shocked if this was a unit scoring 28 points per game. And if that's the case, you have that level of ceiling, that level of potential exposure to points on offense. Yeah, maybe he's not going to have 130 targets year one, but given his profile, we should expect him to be in that 100-plus type of range. And if this offense is scoring, like I said, 28 points per game, I'm more than fine with this spot. And people want to fade JSN, are scared about the landing spot, I'm just going to scoop the value.
Yeah, exactly. He's a guy that people might overthink. He might be available a little bit later than we anticipated, and that's always good news, right? We're always reacting to what the market thinks, and if the market's like Seattle, shit landing spot, it's exactly the same situation we were in with Dallas taking CeeDee Lamb a couple of years ago, where you have these 2 established receivers, and you have the rookie coming in. Spending a 20th overall pick on a rookie indicates that Tyler Lockett is not long for the Seattle Seahawks. That's what that pick indicates. And that's probably what's going to happen. If there's also a possibility that Tyler Lockett doesn't even play another down in Seattle, they could trade him on draft night. They could, whatever the case is. So I still think it's a good spot. 21st overall was a guy that you were very big on. I was a little bit lower on, but a great landing spot nonetheless. Quentin Johnston goes 21st overall to the Los Angeles Chargers. There, he's competing with 2 aging wide receivers. Mike Williams is like 28 years old, can't really stay healthy. Keenan Allen, obviously a little bit older, dealt with hamstring injuries as well last year. He's now tethered to an elite quarterback in Justin Herbert in an offense that is actually very familiar with the type of yards after catch ability that he can use because, they developed a guy like CeeDee Lamb, who is also very good after the catch with Kellen Moore coming into the Los Angeles Chargers coaching staff there. Again, landing spot, great. First round draft capital was a question mark, and it's great. The fact that he got first round draft capital, because I would not have been shocked at all if he didn't get called. His name didn't get called till like 45th overall or something like that. I'm trusting my pre-draft evaluation on Jordan Addison. I'm not going to put him ahead of Jordan Addison, but I do think this is a boost for Quentin Johnston in general.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. This is a guy that entered as my wide receiver 3. He's leaving the first round as my wide receiver 3. You already mentioned the name Jordan Addison. Obviously, we already talked about JSN. They would still be my 1 and 2, but you mentioned it with Quentin Johnston. This was the nuts for a landing spot we could have gotten from Quentin Johnston. Attached to Justin Herbert for the next 5, 10, whatever time he spends in Los Angeles years for the next while. He's this big-bodied wide receiver that thrives in the yak game. New coaching staff wants to get the ball in the hands of their playmakers. And overall, like you kind of mentioned, he doesn't have to play that pure X role. Like, I was scared a team was going to take him and pigeonhole him as this, big outside X wide receiver. You have Mike Williams to play that role. You have Keenan Allen beside him as that savvy intermediate route runner. Let him play the flanker role. Let him play out wide. Let him get these, short intermediate catches and be able to use that yak ability to his advantage. If they're taking him at 21st overall, I trust the plan that they have for Quentin Johnston to be able to develop him. And like you said, this is a clear top 8 overall pick in Superflex rookie drafts, especially with the news of Will Levis not going in the first round.
Yeah, it's great news for QJ. Like I said, I'm not going to go crazy. I'm not going to start taking him 104 in drafts or anything like this just because he went to the Los Angeles Chargers. But I think the biggest takeaway for me from this rookie draft or from this first round of the NFL draft so far is that if you guys are picking between 104, where Anthony Richardson is projected to go right now, and 105, 106, 107, 108 area where these receivers and Jahmyr Gibbs are going, your pick just got more valuable. And it sucks that Will Levis fell to the first round because that would have also contributed to that. But the fact that QJ goes to the Chargers, JSN gets a pretty good landing spot. Jahmyr Gibbs goes 12th overall. We'll talk about Jordan Addison in a second. But let's get into Zay Flowers because he went 22nd overall. Go ahead.
Just one thing I want to quickly shout out. This applies to both of our teams. It's a Fatties Only Friday, baby. We got our defensive tackles. We're rolling. If you guys are unfamiliar, I'm a big Cowboys fan, taking Mozzie Smith last night. Corey, a big Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, taking Kalijah Cansey last night. So saw Tyler say that in chat. I really wanted to highlight it because we celebrate the big boys over here.
Yeah, I mean, Cansey, not really a big boy at 280 pounds and
Fair.
just a freakish athlete. But yeah, definitely like the picks that our teams made. I really like the Cansey pick. I think we
For
just
sure.
need a defensive lineman and that kind of thing. So let's get into Zay Flowers because I think this will be
Yep.
a very talked about issue because nobody is going to like this landing spot,
No.
realistically, right? It's the Baltimore Ravens. Like, when was the last time outside of Marquise Brown in 2021 that they produced a top 24 fantasy wide receiver? The one thing I would point to is they haven't really had good wide receivers. Rashad Bateman was good when he's on the field. He had spike weeks, he flashed, but he hasn't been consistent. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. Odell Beckham Jr. has torn his ACL not once, but twice, and he's over 30 years old now. So I think Zay Flowers going to the Baltimore Ravens is similar to, what we got out of Marquise Brown, his final season there before he got traded to the Cardinals.
Yep.
So I really like the landing spot for Zay Flowers. Again, I ranked it 10th out of the guys that went in the first round because objectively it's not as good of a landing spot as the other guys. But I think a lot of people are going to overreact to this. They're going to let Zay Flowers, depending on what happens today, fall behind a lot of these tight ends, fall behind, a couple day 2 running backs. If we get some guys getting day 2 draft capital, maybe Will Levis and Hendon Hooker go top 50 in this class in the NFL draft, and they take those guys over. Maybe you can get Zay Flowers, first round capital, 22nd overall wide receiver, who I compared to a guy like Christian Kirk, which would be a perfect fit for a guy like Lamar Jackson at the 204 in your rookie draft.
Yeah, that would be an absolute steal. And we kind of talked about it, but it would echo the situation of Jahan Dotson last year, where Jahan Dotson, first round wide receiver, 16th overall, went to Washington. Everybody kind of downplayed the landing spot, and he ended up being a high second round pick in your rookie drafts. It's a similar situation to that of Zay Flowers, where he goes in a murky landing spot, 22nd overall draft capital. But like you kind of said, if you actually examine this landing spot thoroughly, you'll understand that Odell Beckham has a 1-year deal right now. Rashad Bateman had his injury problems in the past. They don't really have a full commitment to Rashad Bateman for what we've seen thus far. And they just signed their franchise quarterback to a 5-year, $260 million deal. At the very worst, all you can point to now is that Zay Flowers, through the entirety of his rookie contract, is going to be attached to one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the entire league.
Yeah, and even if he's not a top 10 passer, he's a top 15 passer. And this offense, Todd Monken's coming in. So in 2021, heading into the 2021 season, we figured the Ravens would throw the ball more. And that is exactly what played out. Mark Andrews had the tight end one season, was unreal. We had Marquise Brown finishing as a top 24 wide receiver. And yeah, Lamar got hurt, but the addition of Rashad Bateman at the end of the first round, Marquise Brown coming into his 3rd season, he was healthy. Mark Andrews coming back. They added Sammy Watkins that year. Just the moves that they made indicated that they wanted to throw the ball more. Now we've seen them sign Lamar Jackson, their quarterback. We've seen them sign Odell Beckham Jr., a receiver who was, very good last time he was on the field in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. Draft Zay Flowers, 22nd overall. Rashad Bateman back healthy. And this could be a better offense from a passing perspective with Todd Monken at the helm, who has been a very pass-heavy offensive coordinator everywhere he's been, whether it was Tampa Bay when he was with us back in 2017 to 2018, Jameis Winston throwing it all over the yard. 2019 or 2020, whatever year that was that he was with the Browns, they were throwing it a lot, even though they were a pretty terrible offense with Baker Mayfield there. And then at Georgia, they ran the ball a lot, but they ran a good scheme and they ran it around the strengths of their quarterback. They had Stenson Bennett as their quarterback. They weren't going to throw the ball a ton in that offense. So I think Monken has proven that he's like a chameleon type of offensive coordinator, which I think is a term that I'm really starting to like. You play to the strengths of your talent. If you have good receivers and they're playing well, you throw the ball. If you don't, and you have Lamar Jackson, J.K. Dobbins, the only plus starters on your offense, then you run the ball. Like that's what Monken's going to do.
Yeah, no, 100% agree there. And I was saying this yesterday. My speech may have been a little slurred, like we kind of mentioned, had some drinks, but you can make the argument right now that Lamar Jackson should be right after Jalen Hurts in fantasy drafts. I think there's a case for it. With Monken coming in, we kind of mentioned yesterday that this is an offense that has legitimate 500 plus, 550 plus pass attempt upside with what we see with Monken. Like you kind of said, Zay Flowers added to the fold, Odell Beckham Jr. added to the fold, and now Rashad Bateman recovering from injury. This is by far, and not to mention freaking Mark Andrews at tight end, but this is by far the best weapons group that Lamar has ever had to work with.
Yeah, exactly. And the real advice here is Zay Flowers, I don't know where he ranks for me yet because we have to see what happens on day 2. But give or take, he's probably going to still be a first-round pick, 111, 112 type of area. And I think he's going to be a great value. People were getting Jahan Dotson in round 2 last year, mid-round 2 at some points. And I think it's going to be a very similar situation with Zay Flowers. So he's probably going to be a guy end up a fantasy community will surprise me, and everybody understands first-round draft capital, good talent, and they take him where he should go. But knowing the fantasy community, I know people are going to love they hate the landing spot of Baltimore and just fade him into oblivion. And I'm going to end up with a lot of shares as a result of that. So the next receiver, the fourth in a row, basically in this draft, was Jordan Addison going to the Minnesota Vikings, which, man, he had some good landing spot potential given where he was projected to go. I think the Giants would have been a good landing spot. The Chargers would have been a great landing spot. The Bills would have been a great landing spot. But the more and more I look at this one, I really, really love it. Because Matt Harmon wrote in Reception Perception, basically in his evaluation of Jordan Addison, he said he sees Addison as an excellent projection to a flanker slot position in the NFL with the route acumen and timing to contribute right away. And he basically said with a couple years of development, he could become a team's number 1 wide receiver. The awesome thing is he will never have to be the number 1 wide receiver in Minnesota. He will never see a number 1 corner as long as Justin Jefferson is on the field. Not only is Justin Jefferson going to draw away attention from defenses and the number 1 corners, it opens up Jordan Addison to play in the slot where he had a Biletnikoff season at Pittsburgh. So when you look at the Vikings offense, Jefferson's pencil him in for 175 plus targets. He's that good. He's the best receiver in the NFL, in my opinion. But this team ranked 5th in neutral pass rate. This team ranked 5th in neutral pace. They threw the ball 672 times last year, which was 3rd in the NFL. And if you remove Justin Jefferson's 186 targets, there was still almost 500 available between Adam Thielen getting 110 targets, KJ Osborne getting 90 targets. TJ Hawkinson, who was only there half the season, got 86 targets, but Irv Smith and the other tight end combined for like 75. Like, even if Hawkinson gets 100 targets, even if Jefferson gets 185 targets, there is still probably 200 to 300 targets available for Jordan Addison up for grabs. Would it shock me at all if this guy is a 100-target rookie season, very efficient, akin to like a Chris Olave type of season?
I was going to say Devontae Smith.
Yeah, Devontae Smith type of rookie season. And he's going to suffer in rookie drafts because everybody's going to look at the landing spot. They're going to go, oh, he's behind Justin Jefferson on the depth chart. Maybe they didn't really like him to begin with because he's 173 pounds. This is one of the best landing spots he could have gone to. And I guarantee you, a lot of you guys will get this guy 108, 109, 110 in your rookie draft, depending on where Charbonnet goes today, some of the other guys.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you there. You don't have the pressure if you're Addison to be that franchise-saving wide receiver right away because you're never going to be the franchise-saving wide receiver over there on Minnesota with Justin Jefferson there. He is the perfect addition to this team because last year, the reason why the Vikings offense basically faltered down the stretch is outside of Jefferson, outside of Hawkinson, they did not have any real consistent pass-catching weapons. Adam Thielen looked washed up last year at the end of the year. KJ Osborne had some nice instances, but he wasn't a guy that they were going to rely upon to be the number 2 outside wide receiver on this team. They needed a guy with Jordan Addison's skill set to be able to get that dog, to be able to get that yards after catch ability he brings, to be able to get that feisty receiver to add next to a guy like Justin Jefferson, who is the entire package. So overall, I mean, like you kind of said, we project this Vikings offense to be very good for fantasy. We project Kirk Cousins to throw for 4,500, maybe more yards. What's stopping us from seeing Jordan Addison, like we kind of said, Chris Olave-esque, Devontae Smith-esque type of rookie season? I don't really see much in the way.
Yeah, if you dropped my comps ranged from Devontae Smith, Chris Olave, Brandon Cooks. Drop a guy like that opposite Justin Jefferson, and he's going to be productive, especially if he gets a lot of time in the slot where he can win, avoid press coverage because he did struggle with it in college, given his size, given his strength. So, Jordan Addison, great landing spot. This is very similar, honestly, to what we saw from Calvin Ridley his rookie year. He goes to an offense. He's not expected to be the number 1. Julio Jones is there. And Julio Jones was aging, so we had the upside that, maybe, Calvin Ridley can be the number 1 eventually. Justin Jefferson's still very young. He's not going to be the number 1 pretty much anytime soon that Jefferson is there. But could this be a Jamar Chase, T. Higgins situation where we have the best young receiver core in the league or the best young duo of receivers in the league? Abso-fucking-lutely. So I love the landing spot for Jordan Addison. He is my 107 right now, right behind JSN and Gibbs. And I think they're all kind of interchangeable depending on your team, depending on what you think of those players. And for me, I'm going to end up with a shit ton of Jordan Addison in
Same.
drafts because I guarantee some people will take Quentin Johnson over him. Some people will take, maybe Zach Charbonnet over him if he gets a good landing spot. There's going to be people that take other receivers, other players over Jordan Addison, and you're going to get him at 108, 109, 110 potentially in rookie drafts. So the final guy that was taken in the first round on offense for fantasy football, and then we'll talk about some veteran winners and losers. We kind of touched on a few already, but was Dalton Kincaid, tight end from Utah, who was the only tight end selected in the first round. The over-under was actually 2.5. Most of the steam on the over, and only one tight end went in the first round. The Dallas Cowboys were expected to take a tight end at 26. The Buffalo Bills then traded up ahead of the Dallas Cowboys at 25 to take Dalton Kincaid, who, in most people's opinion, mine included, is the best pure move tight end in this class, best, pass-catching tight end in this class, because the guy simply moves a little bit different than most tight ends that you're going to watch. He never tested at the combine because he was dealing with an injury, but we did see a lot of productive play. What are you looking at here?
Is this real? Antonio Brown has announced he's returning to the NFL this year as a member of the Ravens.
Oh, what the hell?
Is that real?
I don't know. Is Antonio Brown translator tweeting this or like
what?
Oh yeah, excited to return to the NFL this year. #Ravens flock. Interesting.
I mean, could just be him trolling too.
Could be.
Wow. What? Okay. Sorry.
Anyway, we're sidetracked by AB antics, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Dalton Kincaid, take it away with him. I think my first impression is I think the market might be a tad higher on Kincaid than me, just because he's still a tight end. Dawson Knox, while he's not the greatest tight end in the world, might keep him off the field. And we could see the same fate for Dalton Kincaid that we've seen from a couple other tight ends over the past couple of years, where after their rookie seasons, you can buy them for less than you paid in the rookie draft.
Yeah, no, I agree there. I will say, though, I mean, if you were to pick a landing spot with the draft capital, I mean, Buffalo long-term attached to Josh Allen is going to be the nuts range of outcome, because realistically, like we've kind of mentioned, we expected it to be a wide receiver. We expected it to be, maybe if a guy like Zay Flowers fell, maybe a big body like Quentin Johnson, someone like that to be added to this wide receiver core, because they needed a tertiary weapon outside of Stephon Diggs on this offense. We know Stephon Diggs is this elite 160, 170 plus target muncher, but outside of him, there's no consistent option in this offense. We wanted to hype up Gabe Davis. He's a fine third level threat that can impact the deep portion of a defense, but you needed that consistent chain mover. And Dalton Kincaid is one of the most gifted pass catchers in this draft. We've kind of mentioned it. Obviously, the profile is a little wonky because he's an older player. Obviously, dealt with some injuries with his back, but there's no denying as a move tight end that he could add so much versatility to this Bills offense. And from a fantasy standpoint, as soon as they move off of Dawson Knox, which I think would be in the next year or so, Dalton Kincaid could be a top 8 level, maybe even a top 6 level tight end in terms of dynasty.
Yeah, 2024 is about the first out in his contract right now for Dawson Knox. I will caution people, if they're automatically just like, oh, they're just going to use him as a slot receiver and he's going to be the number 2 target. That's possible, but it's not a guarantee. It's possible that they think he's a tight end and they're going to let him develop behind Dawson Knox for a year, and that could impact his value. So I will say both ranges of outcomes are possible. We could be looking at a guy that costs a lot less this time next year. And then you had to pay for him in rookie drafts, probably like a late first, early second round that you're going to have to draft him as this year. Or we could be looking at a guy that is used exactly how we want him to be used. And he's basically just a big slot receiver for Josh Allen. If you dropped like Mike Gesicki coming out of college into the offense as a slot receiver for Josh Allen, he would have probably been a much more productive tight end over the course of his career. So that's kind of what we're looking at. A couple wide range of outcomes there. A couple veterans we should talk about as well. Obviously, we touched on Swift already. I think he's going to get traded personally. If not, it seems like he's fallen quite out of favor. I also think David Montgomery is a decent buy low. If people are totally hyped up with the 12th overall draft capital, I still think David Montgomery's role is untouched. He's probably still going to be a RB2, 3 type from a redraft perspective this year. So if you're a contender and you can send an early third rounder for David Montgomery, I would absolutely do that. Aside from Gibbs, we also had some veteran quarterbacks come out as winners so far. There's still Hendon Hooker and there's still Will Levis on the board. So I don't want to say Kirk Cousins and Geno Smith are huge winners yet, because it's possible that their teams draft those guys. But as of now, them getting receivers and the best 2 receivers in the class are definitely good news for them.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. But overall, that's pretty much all the fantasy relevant guys in day one, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, anybody else that we didn't talk about veteran wise. I mean, Algier, we touched on, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. It hurts them that QJ was drafted. I think Keenan Allen was an old receiver. He wasn't going to have long-term appeal anyway. He's probably untouched. Same goes for Tyler Lockett in Seattle. They were older receivers. You were going to have them as depth for contenders, and that was pretty much it. So, I would love to go through all these comments, but unfortunately, there's 178 of you guys in here, which definitely,
appreciate that.
if you're in here, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you guys are checking us out for the first time, go back and watch this back from the beginning. We went in the order of the draft order. We'll probably do this again tomorrow. Either before day 3 of the draft, or maybe we'll do a huge wrap up from day 2 to day 3 of the draft as well. So again, check this out, check us out. Hit the subscribe button. Check out our site, flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE. Our rookie rankings, our dynasty rankings, all that stuff will be updated continually as we go through the draft. I'm in the process of updating mine. We'll probably have everything ready to go and updated by Sunday morning at the very latest, so that you guys, if you have a draft starting Sunday at noon like I do, I know I have one that starts at that time right away after the NFL draft, then you'll be prepared for your dynasty draft, for your startup draft. We're doing a startup that's probably going to start very soon after the NFL draft as well. So definitely check us out over there. And make sure to stay tuned tonight, 6:45 or so Eastern time. We will be live breaking down all of the landing spots, all the prospects that go in the rounds 2 and 3 area of the NFL draft, an area of the draft that's usually very fantasy football friendly. So definitely, if you had questions that we didn't get to, bring those to the live stream tonight. We'll have plenty of time to break those down.
100%.
With that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you guys soon.